Ever stop and think about how these big international agreements, between countries actually trickle down? How they might affect your job, maybe, or even just the stuff you buy.
It's a good question.
Yeah, so today we're doing a deep dive into something that just hit the news, a meeting between India's Prime Minister Modi and U.S. Senator J.D. Vance.
Right, focusing on the India-US trade relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And this conversation, well, it seems like it could have some pretty significant knock-on effects down the line.
absolutely. We've been looking at the news updates on this meeting, and our goal here is really to unpack the key bits.
Give people the essentials, right? What was discussed, why it matters.
Precisely. And importantly, try to do it without getting bogged down in all the complex trade jargon. We want to make sense of the progress or potential progress in these talks.
Okay, so let's get into it. What's the main headline from this meeting?
Well, the sources we looked at all point to one thing. The core focus was boosting trade and economic ties, making them stronger.
Okay, strengthening ties? That sounds positive.
It does, and apparently both sides expressed optimism. They talked about advancing towards a mutually beneficial trade deal. That was the phrase used.
Mutually beneficial. Though, did they give specifics on what that deal looks like?
Not really, no. The reports we saw didn't dive into the nitty-gritty details of the potential deal itself, more about the positive direction.
Gotcha. But based on the context, what areas are they likely zeroing in on?
So the probable focus areas mentioned are technology, defense, and supply chain resilience.
Okay, tech, defense, supply chains. Why those three specifically?
Well, they're often called the key pillars of the partnership. Tech, for instance. I mean, India's got this booming digital sector, right?
Yeah, huge.
And the U.S. is looking for reliable tech partners. Think
Mhm.
about data security, AI, all those are emerging areas. So it's not just about, selling more phones or
Anybody
software.
more strategic than that?
Exactly. Strategic alignment.
And defense.
Mm.
That sounds pretty strategic, too. It's not just selling military kit, is it?
No, definitely not. It ties into wider security, stability, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, which is, a major focus globally right now.
Right. And that brings us to the U.S. perspective, I guess. Senator Vance being there, what does that signal?
That's actually a really interesting point. His involvement and the reports mentioning bipartisan support back in the U.S. for stronger ties with India, that really underlines things.
Bipartisan support is always significant.
It is, because it suggests this isn't just tied to one party or political cycle. Vance apparently called India a critical ally.
Critical ally for stability.
Yeah, for stability in the Indo-Pacific and just in global trade generally. That kind of bipartisan backing, well, it makes a potential trade agreement seem more likely to stick, long term.
So for the U.S., it's clearly more than just economics. There's a definite strategic calculation. A key partner in a, let's face it, pretty complicated world.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Strengthening ties with India from the U.S. viewpoint helps promote stability in a really vital region. Plus, it's about diversifying trade relationships, not putting all eggs in one basket, so to speak.
Wider implications beyond just the two countries.
For sure.
Okay, so looking ahead then. The meeting sounds positive, momentum seems to be there, but do we have any idea on a timeline? When might this deal actually get signed?
No, the reports didn't give any specific dates or deadlines for finalizing the agreement, but like you said, the tone suggests things are moving forward, positive momentum.
But trade deals are never simple, are they?
Rarely, yeah. You always have potential sticking points. Experts we read pointed to the usual suspects, really. Things like market access.
Which is basically how easy it is for U.S. companies to sell in India and vice versa.
Exactly. And then tariffs, those taxes on imports, that's always a negotiation point.
Yeah.
And digital trade is another big complex area. Data flows, regulations, lots to iron out there.
Okay, makes sense. So just to quickly sum up for everyone listening, we've got India and the U.S. actively talking trade. Sounds like there's optimism on both sides for a deal that benefits everyone.
Right.
Key areas seem to be tech, defense, supply chains. Driven by economics, sure, but also major strategic thinking, especially from the U.S. side, and crucially, with bipartisan support there.
Yeah.
No finish line in sight yet, but the talks seem progressive. Though, hurdles like market access, tariffs, digital stuff, they still need navigating.
That covers the key points from the sources, yeah.
So it leaves us with a thought, maybe for our listeners, to chew on. We see how linked up global economies are, right? So thinking about these big international trade deals, what parts do you think actually hit closest to home? maybe in your daily life or perhaps in an industry you follow closely.
It's interesting to consider that balance, isn't it? Between what's good for one country's specific interests and how that meshes or sometimes clashes with collaborating globally. How does that balancing act shape the world we actually live and work in? Something to think about.